In this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests to connect the dots between their early upbringing and what they're doing today. Before I get into this, if you guys are not already connected to Your Life Unfiltered on Instagram and YouTube, please be sure to give us a follow and subscribe. With that said, today we have two very special guests. We have Nikhil Torsekar as well as Shelly Sood. Would you guys like to introduce yourself?
Shelly, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm Shelly Sood. I'm an entrepreneur, mother of 3, upcoming author. And I run a company called GeoStar Chicago, Global Institute of Stem Cell Therapy and Research that focuses on regenerative medicine.
Hi, I am Nikhil Torsekar. I also work at GeoStar. I'm the director of marketing there. I work with my wonderful wife, Shelly. And Shelly and I actually work on a couple different initiatives, which also includes a book, a movie, and we launched a podcast called Untether Your Life. And it talks about issues with mental health, holistic healing, and also issues like this podcast about facing the South Asian diaspora. And so very excited to be here on the show.
Excellent. Thanks for joining, Nikhil and Shelly. It's great to have you on this show. Before we talk about what you're doing today, let's just actually, I want to ask you, how did you guys meet? Tell us about your story and what brought you together.
Yeah. So it all started with a fateful game of ping pong when we were, well, I don't know if that's a PC term, so table tennis, when we were 9 years old back in Toledo, Ohio. So it all started in the basement of a local house. It was the finals of the 9 and under table tennis tournament. So it was a brutal match. We bested our rivals, 2 other rivals. So we got to the finals. The first round and the finals were 1 round apart, but it was a pretty intense match. If you know anything about table tennis, usually the score goes until 21 and then you have to win by 2. And so we actually, if you can believe it, this match went to the bitter end. This match actually went to 34-36. That was the final score. Yeah. It was like Wimbledon, but a bunch of uncles and aunties and in basement with shag carpet back in the 80s. So and the interesting thing, I always laugh, it's like kind of characterizes our relationship, which is, not so much adversarial, but we definitely push each other, I think, to be better throughout, and so we've had our struggles, we've had our trials and tribulations, but in the end, I think we push each other to be the best we can be.
Got it. Wow. So you've known each other a long time then, it seems, right? So you're 9 years old, and wow, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. So from there, talk to us a little bit more about how did those motivations kind of transformed you into the human beings that you ended up becoming as an adult. So, and some of them, I'm sure there were some differences, there's some similarities. So talk to us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Shelly, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So, I was a very shy child. I was kind of in my own little world and, didn't really put myself out there, didn't talk to so many people, and slowly evolved and grew out of that phase. But at the same time, I was more of a conformist type of mentality. It's not that my parents were high pressure per se, but it was that unspoken word, you're going to follow what we want you to follow in terms of your career. And we have certain expectations because, as you know, many South Asian families have certain expectations of their children of what they should be growing up. It's doctor, lawyer, engineer, business consultant. There's just a very kind of narrow scope of what career-wise they should do. So I was pre-med, and eventually I decided, okay, that's not what I wanted to do. And I majored in political science, which was kind of a default major because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. So I was kind of the lost college kid who evolved, who grew up in college, who started exploring different things, dating, just opened up quite a bit to a whole new world. But still was deeply rooted in my culture and, general expectations, as well as how we treat our elders and what we look at with regards to family. So when Nikhil and I met, started dating. I still had certain ideas in my mind of how our relationship should evolve and certain rules, and was still quite the conformist to the mentality of being a collective type of society where family is the most important thing. And so I didn't really grow or learn, who I became today and figure out myself until my whole entire life blew up. Until the day my husband filed for divorce. He had undiagnosed bipolar disorder for nearly several years, our whole entire marriage. So we had no idea what was going on. The rug was pulled out from underneath me. It was total devastation in that moment. I was fearful that something would happen to the kids. So that was really my greatest moment of learning and teaching. And they always say, the universe or God or whatever you want to call it puts these barriers and these lessons in front of you to help guide you. And so you understand, well, okay, you're experiencing this horrible thing, but there was a lesson to be learned here. So that was really the time that I evolved and I grew up. And I took ownership of my own life, and I stopped conforming to societal norms. I stopped conforming to what family members wanted. And I started living not just for my husband and for everybody else, but for myself. So that was really when I started evolving and realized that I was no longer going to conform to societal demands and, the expectations of other people outside of my family, and start living for not only just my husband or for my children or for everybody else, and started living for myself as well.
What about you, Nikhil? What's your story?
Yeah, so I mean, there's some similar threads there. Obviously, we grew up in the same culture and the same community back in Toledo. Both my parents were physicians, and it wasn't so much that they pushed me to become a doctor per se, but it was just one of those it was like the default option that I went into. It was kind of this default programming. So I also went into pre-med. Didn't apply to medical school, didn't take the MCATs or anything. But one of the things that I feel fortunate about was as I graduated, that was when the .com boom was happening for the first time. And I really just sunk my teeth into technology because I just saw it as this incredible catalyst, this incredible way of, just blurring boundaries globally. This was so funny. In 2000, I remember taking a trip to India, taking pictures of, the Taj Mahal or some of the caves in Aurangabad and putting them on a website. You guys are probably, I don't know if you guys remember, there was a site called GeoCities. This is way, way back in the day. But I just found that really incredible, just the ability to use technology as a form of expression. So parlayed that into a career where it was doing fintech before it was really a thing. I was working for some banks, working on their trading software, working on their platforms. And I really just found the convergence of business and technology to be very interesting. But it's one of those things, I guess the saying is like you fly too close to the sun and your wings get burned. That's definitely what happened to me because I was really, I think, chasing that elusive dream, of having it all. So I went into management consulting, got my MBA at the University of Chicago, just really sort of was checking all the boxes of what it means to have have it all in the Desi culture. But really was not taking into account mental health, the importance of that. And so just really burning the candle at both ends. As we talked about earlier, I'd suffered from bipolar disorder, and it was one of those things that because in our culture, focus on mental health, I think the tide is definitely changing. The tide is turning, but back then it was really seen as a weakness. There was always that walk it off mentality. If you're having if you're blue and you can't get out of bed, it's just kind of like, just psych yourself into it, because a lot of it is inherited. It's a lot of patterns from our parents who came here and had to struggle and strive, and really just, there was no time. Mental health was a luxury they couldn't afford. So because of that, I really succumbed to the perils of bipolar disorder, which is just where in consulting, it was seen as almost a badge of honor to be able to work on 3 hours of sleep and still perform. But as Shelly talked about earlier, it got to a point where it really almost ended our marriage. We're happily married today and are doing very well. But the lack of focus on mental health really, really derailed me. Fast forward 7 years, I mean, I would say I'm in a very good place because what I would say is I focused on the 4 pillars of mental health, which is, there's the medication, there's the good finding a good therapist, also relationships, obviously, not just my wife and my kids, but also just family relationships, friends, just surrounding myself with the right people. And the 4th thing is purpose. Because even though I was working in consulting and I had a quote good career at PwC, I was miserable. It was very soul sucking work. I was not happy. And, right now I'm working as the work we're doing at Geostar is really transformative. It's just helping people get a second chance at life because a lot of people have given up. They've tried medications, they've tried surgeries, and it's done nothing for them and sometimes made it worse. Whereas we're using some of the most advanced science out there to really help get to the root of the problem. And being a part of that has just been really very meaningful. And then obviously, as we talked about, also the mental health platform, the podcast. So all this stuff, I think, is really helping me remain on stable footing. And there's this quote that I always love to allude to. It's from Viktor Frankl. The quote is, suffering ceases to be suffering once it has meaning. So I did go through a lot of trials and tribulations, but through that, I now am able to tell my story and give hope to a lot of people and just to shatter the stigma of mental health in the South Asian diaspora.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Yeah, so it's interesting because like the way it comes across is that everything that happened, it came through a sequence of different events, right? Like all those sequence of different events basically kind of nudged you in a certain direction. So it's interesting to hear that. So of all the stuff that both of you have been doing today, what are you most excited about? Because you guys are doing a lot, right? There's the book, there's raising a family, there's, you guys' marriage, the podcast, the business, the film, all these different things. What are you most excited about of all those different things going on at the moment?
That's a tough question because I'm excited about all of it. And I want to do more. And Nikhil tells me, you're crazy. You got to stop. But no, I mean, I love my company. I love everything I've done. I've built it from the ground up. Had a lot of lessons learned with running a startup company, the highs and lows of the whole process. So I feel like I got an MBA just through running my company. So that's one piece of it. And it's very gratifying to see my patients do better and really to have an impact on people's lives. The second thing I love is obviously my book because it's my story. It's our legacy. It's, who we are. It tells a whole story and talks about, the generational trauma, getting past cultural expectations, gender roles, and mental health stigmas, and basically to come out on top and untether both of our lives in very, very different ways. But at the same time, go through that healing journey individually, but merge together in our marriage and see each other grow. And even today, just continuing that healing process and that knowledge of learning from other people, embracing meditation, mindfulness, pranayama, breath work, those kinds of things. So on that front, the book has been an incredible experience and, hopefully it'll be out soon as well. But yeah, there's more to come and I'm hopeful to, write even my second or third book. So we'll see.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, and I would say, I would just add to that. Yeah. I'm very passionate about, a lot of the stuff and, I feel very blessed that I have an amazing spouse like Shelly because I think she's really a trailblazer. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that, 7 years ago, if, she would have said in the midst of this horrible situation, you'd have a book, you'd have a movie in the works, you'd have a company that's doing very well. You'd have all this stuff, she probably, neither of us could have seen it because we both subscribe to a lot of the templates in Indian culture, because it's like, I think we've come a long way, but still to a large extent, there is that traditional patriarchy where it's like, a lot of wives, they do tend to take a back seat, and that's unfortunately the script that we followed, which is just that I was the one who was going out and, getting the MBA, doing the consulting, making it up the food chain, where she was sort of home taking care of the kids and everything. So, but I feel grateful that, she turned that tragedy into triumph by really owning her vision and owning her destiny, and launching this company. And I say that also because I do have the podcast right now, but a lot of this was an offshoot of her going out and doing a lot of these media appearances, because initially, like I said, I had no plans of launching a podcast. It just so happened that she had done some interviews, and this started off as just kind of like a vault of all her media appearances. And then I said, there's so much opportunity here. And as you guys know, the discussion about this, this is really a amazing moment for South Asians, because we're getting into this era of expression. It's, you guys are talking to all these amazing creators on TikTok and Indian matchmaking, I think you guys were talking about earlier. So it's really an amazing time to be a South Asian in America, I think. And so I bring all that up with the context of the podcast, because that would be something that I'm extremely proud of, because as you know, I mean, it just has the power to really connect people, not just the guest and the host, but people listening. And I think I may have mentioned earlier, is just that there's so many people who have reached out to me that I haven't talked to in years, who have said that a topic about like mental health, or a topic about just South Asian cultural norms, it's just something they had been struggling with, and they felt empowered to come forward and either, do some blog posts, or maybe even start a podcast of their own. So my tagline with the show is, I'm passionate about the power of conversation to catalyze change. And I think as a podcaster, I think it's just a privilege, and I'm really fortunate to have that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well said.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really like that messaging, because it's very eloquently said. And I think it also demonstrates the power of conversation. Exactly as you're saying, right? Using conversation to catalyze change. Because if you can share someone else's story, and it adds value to one or many individuals, like that sticks with them. It's like, that's exactly why it makes perfect sense that you're having people reach out to you, because something that occurred in that dialogue really resonated with them, that they felt the need to let you know about it, right? So that shows you how powerful that messaging actually was. So that's amazing.
And the other thing is, it's just that as South Asians, it's such an interesting thing, because what I always say is we just have so much wisdom. I always say either wisdom in our DNA or wisdom at our fingertips. And I don't mean this to be arrogant, but, there's so much wisdom in our tradition, with the Gita, with, the Upanishads and all this stuff that is making it to mainstream right now, that we've, literally had at our disposal for centuries, right? And I just find it's just such a privilege to be able to have these discussions with practitioners who are experts in it. And again, I always talk about like reclaiming it, not so much in a confrontational way, but the fact is, for mental health especially, there's so much we can draw from, that we don't have to pop a pill if we have depression or anxiety. We have meditation, we have breath work, we have pranayama, all this stuff that it's just almost like it's sitting on the shelf. And it's such a shame that it's been, that we haven't really leveraged it to the full hilt. And so I'm just one person, but I mean, if I can help another person see the power of that, then I feel like, my job is, I feel like I've done my job.
Great.
100%. Nikhil, I actually want to go back to one thing you said before, and to the extent you're comfortable sharing, I just want to go a little bit deeper into something you said before, that you had reached this breaking point, right? Where, you were working really, really long hours, and then there was a lot to manage in this. So first of all, when you reached the breaking point, how did you recognize that, okay, this is it, right? So this is not going to work out anymore. First of all, what made you realize that? And number two, once you realize that, how did you diagnose the situation? That what do you do? What do you need to do next in order to get out of that situation?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, happy to discuss it. So, the phrase rock bottom, I think, is a cliche, but it's something that I can definitely attest to the, transformative power of that, because I think we've all had our bad days or we've had our bad weeks, but there comes a point where your reality is completely turned upside down, and that was my breaking point. It was in 2016, and I don't have the official tally here, but it was the final of many manic episodes where it was just, if you know anything about mania, it's just something where what I always equated to is like, it's like looking through the looking glass, basically looking at a funhouse mirror of reality, which is just basically in your mind, you have all the friends in the world. You're the most dynamic person. The analogy I always use is the movie Limitless, where Bradley Cooper, he takes a pill and he's just walking on water. He's invincible and he can do no wrong. And then all of a sudden one day, the pill runs out and he just crashes. And that's basically what happened to me. It's just, I was working at a bank. I had my title was like global director of information management or something, some highfalutin title that sounded really great and sexy or whatever. But it was absolute hell, because I was, first of all, we were separated. I had a horrible relationship, not just with Shelly, but with our kids. And my finances were completely out of whack. And I just, I couldn't see it. I just kept saying, oh, things will turn around. The thing is, when you have bipolar disorder, everyone else is an idiot. You're a genius and nobody else can see the quote unquote plan that you have. And that's what happened with me. Is it kept escalating and escalating, till I lost another in a series of jobs. And, I don't want to over dramatize and say I was, destitute and living on the streets, but, I was going through my, bank of Starwood points that I accumulated as a consultant, as I'm sure you guys know about, racking up those hotel points. And, it got to a point where I always, it's sometimes hard to discuss, but it was the support of family that I didn't have, and that was the final breaking point. Was Shelly was trying to get my dad to come forward and support me, but he was trying to basically tell her that this was all some part of some plan that I had, that, the word he used was sociopath. And he just basically, it was like, I heard that, and it was just kind of like, even though we were on the outs, it just really broke me, and so the analogy I always use is, if you're in corporate America, if you've gone on these retreats or whatever, they have this thing called the trust fall exercise, where it's just basically, you fall back and you allow the person behind you to catch you. And that's essentially what I did, which is just, I knew that whatever I was doing wasn't working. And so I asked, I basically said to Shelly, because she had been trying to get me to get the diagnosis, because she kept saying, look, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a qualified psychiatrist by any means, but you need to get checked out. So I finally got the correct diagnosis of bipolar disorder, and finally, I had to go for hospitalization, get on the right, treatment, medication, et cetera. It was like ECT treatments. It was pretty horrific, really. But it was just that humility, just sort of waving the white flag and realizing that I didn't have all the answers, that helped me sort of get on the road to recovery. And it was a long process. I wouldn't say it was overnight, but I look back 7 years later, and, I really hope that people out there, if they're in those straits, if they don't have a supportive spouse, that they'll reach out to organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. That's any kind of support organizations. Just get some help. Don't try to tough it out and grin and bear it, because that's just a recipe for disaster.
Wow.
Absolutely. And thanks so much for sharing that, Nikhil. First of all, what an incredible story, and really kudos to you for being able to kind of, obviously not just living, but also kind of coming out on the other side, really, really strong. And you're doing so well right now. So really kudos. And so happy to see that happen. Yeah.
And again, I one thing I want to add also, Deepam and Keto, my heart really goes out to people out there, South Asians, I would say South Asians especially, but who are struggling with mental illness, because it's such a stigmatized condition in our culture.
Yeah.
And there is so much pressure to put on a happy face. And what I always say is like smile for the cameras and have that Facebook or Instagram curated lifestyle. And so, even if family members can see it, they're embarrassed to get help, because it's like, what does that mean to their standing at the temple or at the cultural center? So unfortunately, I mean, we had to kind of go it alone, Shelly and I. We had to break away from our family, from my parents. I wish them well. I don't think that they had any malicious intent, but it's just, in order to move forward, we sort of had to, as they say, leave behind what doesn't serve us. So, and that's a decision that a lot of people in the South Asian diaspora, it's hard to make, because, as Shelly alluded to earlier, it's a very collectivist society, and we're all sort of wedded to our community, and so that can be very challenging.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot to. It's a very difficult decision to make. I can totally see that, right? Because it's like from a very early age, we're almost rooted to be involved in a community, to want to be involved in a community. So detracting from that is no easy step. So kudos to you guys for taking that step, which seems like was definitely the right step for both of you together. So
thank you.
Shelly, would love to hear from you. How do you reflect on what Nikhil said, and I know we heard his story, but what's your perspective as you're going through this? Obviously, you guys work together.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing for me was to be able to look beneath the mask of this mental illness. And that most people cannot do, because when somebody is emotionally abusive, verbally abusive, you're just going to look at what they're saying or doing at face value. So I have really had to go within myself. I had to remember what our marriage was about when we got together, what he is like as a person, and go deep within his soul and understand that this is just an illness. So when it's occurring, it's very hard, because, there were times where I would lash out back at him. I would ride his manic roller coaster. So I would try every different type of emotion to get the response I wanted, and I'd never get it. So he'd, lash out at me. I'd lash back. He sometimes lashed out at me, and then I cried. I mean, it was like I played this roller coaster. And so the other issue was that I knew exactly what was going to happen before it actually happened, because I had lived these cycles before. But it was only when my whole world exploded and he filed for divorce and left and everything that I realized what was happening. It was almost like it was in my mind, it was in my subconscious, but it didn't really come to the surface and a realization of that it was bipolar disorder until I virtually lost everything. So that was my lesson to be learned. And so I watched this train. It was like he was on a train on the ride of his life in this manic high. And everybody around him was cheering him. None of the doctors, lawyers, therapists, friends, nobody believed me. And I would tell everybody, well, this is what's going to happen next. He's going to lose his job. He's going to lose his apartment, or he's going to, not have any money, or whatever it may become suicidal. And so that level of anxiety to watch something happen and have no control over the situation was the hardest thing that I had to live through.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine how much emotions were running through you at the time when all this stuff was happening. So it's definitely not an easy situation to be in. Do you have any advice for anyone that might be going through not necessarily the exact same thing, but something maybe along the same lines?
I think it's really important as a spouse or loved one to get involved in your loved one's therapy, in their treatment plan. So even if, they have depression, anxiety, whatever it may be early on, the more knowledge you have, the more powerful you are, because doctors today, they're wonderful. Yes, we need them. But a lot of times if we totally let go and, don't have any control over the situation, then we can get ourselves into more trouble if we're blindly following somebody else's, diagnosis or treatment plan or whatnot. So it's really critical to start, owning your own health, which is part of our podcast and book. And we talk a lot about that, because in the early days when Nikhil, was having depressive symptoms and whatnot, I really was just too busy with my life, with the children, with raising 3 kids. When we separated, we only had a 14-month-old baby. Our third child was so little. So I was consumed with raising the children in the household and being the supportive wife and living that, American dream, the nice house in the suburbs and, the husband who's in the banking industry. And so I got very, very consumed with, the facade that you want to create for the outside world, that I failed to really look within myself, look within what I wanted out of life, where my healing was going to go. And so it was a journey that I needed to go through. As awful as it was and horrific, there were so many lessons to be learned and so many mistakes that I made that if I hadn't gone through all that, I don't think I would be here today.
Yeah. So would you say that the entire experience created a strength within you? It gave you if I can get through this, I can accomplish anything, that type of drive, that type of energy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I knew then the barriers that were going to be placed in front of me, which they're always barriers, I would be able to push aside and I will be able to get through with full force and conviction. And I always had that conviction to help him. But throughout the whole journey, I would have so many barriers with the system that there was just no way for me to get my way and for him to get treatment. And so once I let go and I stepped back and I just let it be. And I think the problem with society today is that we're doing, and we think that we're going to get the result we want when we do. And we really forget to just be.
That's powerful. Yeah, that's very true. I 100% agree with that. So, Shelly, fast forward a few years, Shelly and Nikhil actually, fast forward a few years. Now, obviously, you came out really, really strong out of the whirlwind that you went through. You started a company, which is GeoStar Health. You guys touched upon this a little bit. So, tell us a little bit more about how did you get the idea of that company in the first place, and how did you go about starting it? What does it do?
So GeoStar has been around for about 15, 20 years. And I happened to run into the CEO via a LinkedIn message. And I was exploring stem cell therapy. We were considering stem cell therapy for my father, who had been suffering from Parkinson's disease. And so that was, kind of a personal thing. And I had a draw to some alternative treatments outside of traditional medicine. And, I crossed paths with him at the right time. We became really good friends. He's like family now today. And, I just went from there. I launched the company and dived right into it with, limited experience in the industry. But at the same time, I also helped manage another facility out in India for stem cell therapy. So I had a little bit of a marketing background there. But I basically became the type of person who wanted to live and fulfill her dreams no matter what. I became much less risk averse and came to eventually not base my actions in a fear-based type of mentality. But back to GeoStar. GeoStar is a Global Institute of Stem Cell Therapy and Research, and we help patients who are suffering from degenerative conditions like autoimmune conditions, Crohn's, diabetes, arthritis, lung disorders, those kinds of things. And we use a patient's own stem cells to treat the patient in our office and facility for a half-day procedure. And so this has been my 4th baby, I guess. I have 3 children and, 5th baby, 3 children, a dog, and a company. So it's been extremely fulfilling and a wonderful journey with regards to all the learning.
Yeah, amazing. So when it comes to, I'm assuming there's one or multiple products that GeoStar markets, right? Where are those products in terms of clinical trials, and is it FDA cleared, et cetera? Like where are those like products or drugs in that pipeline today?
So Geostar itself is less on the clinical side and more on the research side. Geostar, our Chicago location, is purely clinical. So we implement a lot of the protocols that are research driven by the research division of the company, which is why we have such an advantage over the industry per se. In terms of clinical trials, the clinical trials that are going on are within Geostar itself. So like, for example, right now we're working on a long COVID clinical trial. We were approved back when COVID hit by the FDA to treat COVID-19. So some patients we were helping who were on ventilators during COVID-19. So we are, I mean, these people, I can't tell you, they are amazing. Like they're beautiful humanitarian type of people, but also extremely brilliant. And our scientists are 10 steps ahead of the game when it comes to science versus where society and the world is really at today.
Okay, wow, fascinating.
I'd say to add to that, I mean, because like Shelly's saying, most of clinical work in Chicago, we mostly focus on treating patients, but two of the innovations that are just incredible, groundbreaking stuff is one is what's called the universal blood donor. So our scientists actually developed the technology to produce red blood cells from stem cells in the lab. So if you think about the implications of that, blood transfusions is a big problem because of three things. Number one, the shortages. Obviously, COVID didn't help that at all. Number two is the chance of there's quite a bit of contamination that's still going on. So that's affecting the amount of viable blood supply. And third is the chance of matching because there's different blood types. And so this technology actually develops type O negative blood cell or red blood cells, which is the best for matching. So this technology is just right now, they're in the process of finding investors for that. And the other one is skincare serum, which is basically using the molecules developed from isolating the molecules from stem cells and putting them into skincare serums. And they've done extremely well in efficacy testing. Now, it's just, I think the challenge is just these guys are literally 10 steps ahead and they're always on to the next innovation. It's just a matter of getting that innovation to market. I think it'll be really incredible for many markets,
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Cause like, I know with the clinical trials process, there's also a lot of use cases and each use cases has to be researched extensively, right? Multiple phases of clinical trials and FDA clearance, FDA approval, all that kind of stuff. So, but that's fascinating. When you're talking about skincare, it sounds like you're almost talking about topical skincare.
It is, yeah. So it's a topical serum, yeah. So what we do is we have protocols in the lab where we are actually culturing the stem cells. And after we culture the stem cells, they release thousands and thousands of molecules. And so we capture these molecules and put it into a serum. So the serum has pretty, standard type of ingredients that you'd see on a topical skincare serum. So we're not putting live stem cells in a serum because that would just be ridiculous. We're putting the molecules from the stem cells into the serum as our secret sauce type of ingredient. So that helps produce the collagen, decreases the inflammation.
I see. Okay. So the building blocks of those stem cells, essentially, because you're saying the molecules. So basically, you're infusing the building blocks of stem cells to ignite that cellular regeneration process.
The healing process, exactly.
Yep, you got it.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. I can see a lot of combination with that type of stuff with other proven treatment methods out there. Like, for example, for skincare, derma rolling or something like that, right? You can combine the increased absorption by creating those channels in the skin with this potential topical skincare product that has the building blocks of stem cells in there, kind of enhance the efficacy and all that. So that's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Great. Well, actually, that brings us to our next section of the podcast, which is what we call as rapid fire, as the name suggests. First thing that comes to mind. So it'll be interesting to see how your guys' answers match or don't match with each other. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Is this a newlywed game or something? What is it? Is that where you guys got this from?
All right, let's jump in. So, okay, first one is an easy one. Tea or coffee?
None of the above. Mud water, actually, I drink. So. I,
Oh, mud
Coffee.
water. That's interesting. Okay. Wow, there you go. Mountains or beaches?
Beaches.
it's
Wow, okay. Um, morning person or night owl?
night owl.
Morning.
Okay.
Not
Interesting.
true.
Interesting.
I guess. Oh, so you're
Not true
getting the
for
kids ready. You're getting the kids ready for school tomorrow. Then is that right?
No. I'm meditating while you get them ready.
interesting. Interesting. All right. What are you guys' favorite comfort food?
Pizza.
Macaroni and cheese.
Really?
Okay.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow, Shelly, you found something new about Nikhil today.
Secret identity. Yeah.
She's just surprised at his answer, I guess.
I was gonna say khichdi, but I knew that wouldn't have been accurate.
Okay. What's your favorite virtue in others?
Authenticity.
Compassion.
That makes sense. That makes sense. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Leaving the kitchen cabinet doors open.
Pet peeve.
I feel like I know who's causing that pet peeve.
Yeah.
Maybe the kids.
God, I don't know. Hypocrisy, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm gonna ask Nikhil. Nikhil, what's Shelly's secret superpower? And Shelly, what's Nikhil's?
Shelly's secret superpower, I would say, is I'm trying to decide between two. I want to make sure I have the supporting evidence, or not evidence, but the supporting rationale here.
Okay.
I guess I would say it's intuition, because something she talks about quite a bit on her blog as well as some podcasts. But there's been a lot of dips in the road, a lot of bends in the road, and a lot of curveballs thrown at Shelly over the years. Obviously, one is which she alluded to earlier with the marriage going off the rails. But she really believed in her heart about the power of our marriage and the power of not just our marriage, but what we could do together. I don't think like she had it in her mind that we would be, doing a podcast per se. But the point is, I think she saw the trajectory that many others couldn't see. Her own family, friends, they were all saying, this marriage is kaput. You need to move on. But I think Shelly really saw a lot more there. She could kind of connect the dots more than others can. And same with recently, there were some things that I, in my heart, felt were the right thing to do. And she was saying, what she always says is, I'm just a messenger. I'm not necessarily giving an opinion. It's intuition. It's a spiritual sense from the universe and whatnot. Not to get too woo-woo here, but the point is, there's just a lot of things that she sees that I think a lot of us can't. And I think she, I think it's something that's served her well and is going to continue to serve her well.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. Shelly, what about you?
Wow.
Let's see if we can top that.
I don't know.
I'm trying to get her to get the kids ready tomorrow in the morning. So that's why I'm trying to butter her up.
That makes a lot of sense.
I would say Nikhil's superpower is resilience. And not even just resilience, but resilience with an ounce of humor, an ounce of compassion, an ounce of humility. And because most people cannot come back from what he came back and what he lived through and the trauma he lived through his entire life from his childhood onwards. And, I give him great props to, be able to bounce back from that. Not even just bounce back, but go from a surviving mode to a thriving mode, and not to just do that and ride my coattails of what I was doing in my life, but to find his own way and his own purpose and what he wants to pursue, and rebuild the family and rebuild the marriage, and really understand and see what the most important things are in life. Because I feel like a lot of us really just forget. But, we get so involved in the outside world and what other people think of us, and, how our actions are going to be perceived, that we really just forget to look within ourselves for the answers.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so actually, this is for your individual answers, but what a superpower you wish you had? It can be unrealistic as well. It doesn't need to be realistic.
I will say discipline. I mean, I'd say I'm disciplined in a lot of ways, but I mean, I have to say, like, I don't have a sweet tooth. I have a sweet mouth. I literally, like, my proclivity for sweets is just, it's my Achilles heel. And so I am, doing more with meditation, breath work, and mindfulness to try to really quiet my mind and not necessarily just be susceptible to a lot of the whims, a lot of the addictive tendencies, whether it's social media or whether it's chocolate, etc. So I'd say discipline. My hat's off to people out there who can keep those vices at bay, because it is something that I struggle with. So gotcha. I'd like to one day have a big D on my chest for discipline, man.
Okay.
Maybe Marvel will have something like that in the works.
Hey, you can sell it alongside with the film, right?
There you go.
Pitch it. You could do like, we have a surprise for you today. We don't have just one film. We have 2 film ideas.
Yeah, there you go.
A superpower that I wish I had. To be honest, I really don't wish or long for anything that I'm not. And I'm quite fulfilled with who I am today. But if I were to really reach and think about something that I would love to be, is probably maybe a little bit more comical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, last question in the series. What's been your biggest accomplishment in the last 1 or 2 years? Individually or together, either or and.
You want to go first, Shelly?
Oh, okay. In the last 1 or 2 years, I would say I've really grown with regards to how I run my company, what kind of entrepreneur I am. And, I had alluded to this earlier, but really stopped focusing on a fear-based mentality of things going wrong. Because when I had first started my company, I wasn't really healed. I had a lot of, probably PTSD, had been through so many traumatic experiences that I needed really the time to start healing and evolving. And so in the last couple of years, I have really started basically focusing on success and not, worrying about outcomes, and not basing my actions on a fear-based mentality, and becoming more proactive in my responses to things versus reactive in a negative light to the outside world. So I've worked very hard at looking within myself, focused on my own healing through breath work, meditation on a daily basis, as well as building more and more knowledge every single day.
Okay. Wow.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I've talked about it before, earlier in the show, but the thing I'm most proud of is definitely the podcast, because I just feel, and I think it's a mistake for people to get on the podcast bandwagon and say, they're going to be the next Joe Rogan or the next Tim Ferriss and strike it rich. That's definitely, by all means, that's definitely a worthwhile pursuit. But I think for me, it's just, really heightened my appreciation for the power of serendipity. And what I mean by that is just the conversations that I have that can spark interest in somebody else's mind, or the connections that we've been able to form. For instance, like with the book and the movie, it's all in Hollywood. It's all about who you know. Now, granted, we don't have like Robert Downey Jr. sort of banging on our door like to be in our movie or any huge amazing stars like. But the point is these conversations, and again going back to the tagline, they have really they've really shown me the power of conversation to catalyze change, because it can change people's viewpoints. It can change people's understanding of whether it's, as Shelly talked about, like breath work, pranayama, meditation, Ayurveda, all this stuff that is pretty mystical to most people. And when we have people like, the chief medical officer of Chopra Global, Sheila Patel, she had come on and talked about all these topics. Just when people can hear about it and broken down into a digestible format, I think it can be extremely powerful. And I feel like it's just the tip of the iceberg right now, because as I mentioned, people are reaching out to me now, saying like they heard a podcast a year ago, and for some reason, like whether it was a birthday or whatever reason, it's just been the occasion to reconnect with a lot of people that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise. So I'm very proud of that, and I'm very, very humbled to be a part of this community, and of storytellers and people who are helping others spread their own message.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think before we wrap, would you like to tell us a little bit more about the book, the podcast, as well as the movie, and specifically when is the book coming out, so that our listeners can find and wherever it's available?
So the book should be out within 6 to 12 months.
Okay, awesome. I'm guessing the movie is going to come out after that, or is that working in parallel?
That's a long haul. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I see. Okay. So I know this felt like a short conversation, Shelly and Nikhil, but we'd love to have you back.
If people are interested, they can find us at shellysood.com. That's where a lot of the information about the book and the movie is. And there's also, Shelly's done a lot of content writing on that site, blog posts about things like intuition, meditation, whole host of topics. And then the podcast is untethyryourlife.co. So Shelly Sood, that's SHELLYSOOD.com. And then untether your life, the word untether your life.co. Unfortunately, .com is taken, and I'm still fighting that battle, but hopefully hopefully I can arm wrestle the person who has it, and we can get that easier to spell domain one of these days.
For sure. Thanks for sharing that.
Or you can make it seem more high tech and put .io.
Yeah, that's true. Well, what's interesting? The .fm domain I found this interesting, was way more expensive. I don't know if you guys have a domain for your site, but I found that very strange. It was like much more expensive for the FM. So,
interesting. You're saying relative to .com, or what?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Not to .com, but for some of the others, yeah, it was weird.
And then you can find our company at Geostar, GIOSTAR, Chicago.com.
Awesome.
Great.
Amazing. Thank you guys for that. Well, this was an absolute wonderful discussion. Love to learn more about what you guys do on when we eventually bring it back, probably closer to when you guys are releasing either the book or the film, or if there's a major occurrence happening with Geostar. Hope you guys enjoy this conversation. Deepam does have a question he loves to ask every guest before we wrap up. So Deepam, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ketan. So do you guys have any recommendations for our listeners? Recommendation could be book, a movie, podcast, and it could be your podcast, or any general advice, anything.
Yeah, I would say that there's so many books and courses out there about personal growth, but I would really recommend a platform called Mind Valley. If your listeners aren't familiar with it, are you guys familiar with that platform at all?
I'm not familiar with it.
I mean, it's just the most amazing thing I've encountered. I actually have a couple reels about it. We both do. on our Instagram. But it's just, you go to mindvalley.com and they, you have to pay for the membership, but they have tons of content that's free all over YouTube. That they have content on everything, and breathwork. That's really where we got our footing from some of the training on that. Breathwork, meditation, public speaking. There's just, I don't know, the list just goes on and on. But what I always say is there's the 3 C's. It's the content, the community, and the connection. Because you can sit there and watch YouTube videos till the cows come home, but they have such an amazing community all over the world. I think it's like 12 million members, and in every country, and they have in-person events as well as virtual. So I would say if you want to learn about how to be a better version of yourself, that's definitely Mindvalley is definitely your best bet.
Okay, interesting. Okay, we'll definitely have to check it out then. So is it like courses? Like what kind of content is on there?
I kind of equate it to like TEDx meets Burning Man. And when I say that, I mean that like TEDx, obviously has a lot of very educational, inspirational content. But they also have events. So they have events. I think they're doing one in Dubai pretty soon. But they had one in LA that I went to in the fall. And yeah, they have courses, and it's like, they also have like within these courses, they have like discussions. So you can connect with people all over the country, all over the world, and share your experiences. Because what I always say is, when I say connection, it's like, you can, as I said, you can watch YouTube videos all day long, but if you have the ability to discuss with people and share your learnings and share your experience, it makes the content more sticky and it makes it more relevant, right? So I think that that's something that Mindvalley offers that I can't see others, replicating. And I would say that's a personal goal of mine, is to not necessarily replicate Mindvalley, but just build a community that's so mission driven and so united in purpose. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing. I'm definitely going to have to check that out then.
For sure.
With that said, that does bring us to the conclusion of our discussion here. It was an absolute pleasure having you both on. Thank you all for listening. And again, if you guys are not already connected with Your Life Unfiltered, either on Instagram or on YouTube, please be sure to give us a follow and subscribe. We hope you all enjoyed this episode. And if you guys would like to learn more about Shelly and Nikhil's ventures or companies, be sure to visit the different various websites and pages that they alluded to. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.